The first thing you notice at Machu Picchu is how the stone fits. It clicks into place like gears in an enormous machine, smooth and impossible to pry apart with human hands. You step on a stair carved from the living rock, and the mountain feels engineered to carry people, not crush them. High above the Urubamba River, at 2430 meters, the city hangs on a spine of Andes. Green terraces step down the slope, each one a thin ribbon of earth held by a wall of rock. Water whispers through channels. Wind and mist sweep the plaza. The light changes fast. Machu Picchu looks like a triumph of balance. It reads as if the architects insisted the cliff itself could be a platform, and that gravity could be negotiated, not simply endured. That is the idea at the center of this place, a city that literally and metaphorically defied gravity. It began as a decision. A ruler with a new vision wanted a seat of power carved into a mountain. Pachacuti rearranged the world he inherited. He sent engineers and masons, astronomers and priests, people who understood soils and storms. They chose a site with a spring and a ridge's betrayals. They accepted the slope because the slope met the sky. Why build so high and so precariously? Partly for sightlines. From the plaza you can see the zigzag of the river, the ridges folding like pages, and Huayna Picchu rising behind the city like a guardian. The Incas wanted to be where the heavens met the earth. They wanted a place that made cosmology visible. But there was more than symbolism. The mountain offered defense and control. Terraces created new farmland. Springs meant water. The stone gave permanence. The choice required innovation. Watch the terraces closely. They are not gardens perched on the cliff by chance. Each terrace is a retaining wall, a drainage system, a microclimate. Builders cut into the slope and laid a foundation of large stones, then successive layers of gravel and sand, capped with topsoil. Rainfall would pass through the ground, not pool. Water that could otherwise loosen the hill passed safely through stone and out through channels. In engineering terms, the terraces act like a series of stacked buttresses. They hold the mountain in place and distribute its weight. On a rainy afternoon, the terraces absorb and release water slowly. On a dry season, they retain enough moisture for crops. The design reduces erosion. It is, in effect, gravity management. The stonework above the terraces is another answer to the challenge. In the sacred precincts, blocks of granite were dressed with astonishing precision. The walls are made of irregular polygons, each block carved so tightly that a thin blade cannot slip between them. There is no mortar. The fit itself is the lock. That choice had consequences. A mortarless wall can flex. A precisely cut stone can wedge into place and move a hair's breadth during an earthquake and then settle again without collapsing. This is not magic. It's engineering adapted to the seismic realities of the Andes' interlocking forms that allow controlled movement instead of brittle rigidity. Look at the doorways and niches. They are trapezoidal, wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. This simple geometry resists lateral forces. When the earth shakes, these frames hold. Stairs stepped into solid rock serve as anchors. Foundations are cut directly into bedrock in many places. Where bedrock does not present itself, builders packed fill, gravel, and stones to create a reliable platform. Water is the quiet hero here. A spring rises within the city's heart. The engineers channeled it with stone aqueducts and fountains, distributing fresh water to plazas and homes. They carved drainage channels under plazas and along walls, cut conduits into bedrock, and stepped weirs into channels to dissipate energy from fast flows. When it rains, and the Andes have violent, concentrated storms, the system is tested. Water surges off slopes. It finds the channels. It flows through a network that handles both steady supply and sudden floods. There are carved steps that direct overflow away from foundations. There are spillways that slow the rush. The city breathes rain without drowning. The pumice-like patina on many stones tells a different story. Long exposure, countless seasons of freeze and thaw, the growth of lichens, the slow polish of hands and wind. Yet the structures remain. That endurance is another kind of defiance against time itself. How were these massive stones moved? How did people lift walls into place with no draft animals, no iron tools? The answer is often reduced to sweat and ingenuity. That's not wrong. It is just incomplete. Masonry work combined human labor with an intimate understanding of local materials. Workers exploited natural fractures, split stone along grain lines, and used levers, ropes, and ingenuity to manipulate heavy blocks. They dismantled slopes and refilled them. They used ramps, but the ramps were temporary and subtle. Much of the work was fitting, trimming, and tuning. We should name some of the people who made it happen. The master masons remain anonymous. Their signatures are the joints. The aggregate labor force likely included specialists sent from across the Inca realm, people organized through the Mita system, a form of state labor that mobilized farmers, artisans, and engineers. There were priests who observed the sun. There were astronomers who placed windows and sightlines to track solstices and stars. There were farmers tending terraces, millers in the plazas, and artisans finishing stone altars. One of the most famous stones is the Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun. It is a carved monolith on a raised platform. From certain angles, it throws measured shadows. Rituals were performed here. The stone's geometry relates to solar passages. It anchors not just ritual time, but the structure of the city itself. It is both a calendar and a pillar of meaning. In 1911, the American historian and explorer Hiram Bingham climbed through the cloud and into the ruins. He thought he had found Vilcabamba, the last Inca refuge. He called it a lost city. Newspapers called it a wonder. Museums took fragments. Bingham's arrival is often told as discovery, but discovery is complicated. Local Quechua people had known and farmed around Machu Picchu for generations. Melchor Artiga guided Bingham to the ruins. The idea that the city was hidden from everyone is false. It was hidden from empires and archives, not from living memory. That distinction matters because it reframes ownership, stewardship, and narrative. When Bingham and his team walked the plaza, they saw a city remarkably intact. Buildings, stairways, terraces, fountains, all pointing to a single era of high craft. They removed artifacts and documented. The world learned the site's outline. Scholars debated its purpose. Tourists later brought cameras and boots. The immediate crisis for the site was not ancient earthquakes alone. It was modern attention. Roads, trains, and tourism poured strangers onto the narrow terraces. Foot traffic shook fragile soils. Uncontrolled development threatened drainage and slopes. Conservationists responded with limits, research, and restoration. UNESCO declared Machu Picchu a World Heritage Site in 1983. That designation protected it legally, but also increased its fame. Protection created tensions between local economies and global heritage. Still, the mountain keeps testing human intentions. Heavy rains in recent decades have produced landslides near the site's access routes. Erosion undermines pathways. Plants take root between stones, wedges of green pushing mortarless joints apart. Archaeologists now act as engineers again, studying soil mechanics, mapping subsurface anchors, and reinforcing drainage. The same precision that created Machu Picchu must be applied to preserve it. There are moments inside the ruins when the ancient and the modern seem to breathe together. A Quechua guide kneels and ties a coca leaf bundle against a wall, speaking to the earth. A group of students sketch a temple under a gray sky. A mason with new tools tests how a particular joint responds to vibration. Those are human moments. They are small, and they matter because they connect the past to the present. Machu Picchu's layout divides the urban from the agricultural, the sacred from the secular. Narrow alleys separate clusters of houses. The Temple of the Sun curves around a natural rock outcrop. The room of 3 windows frames a view of the valley. Each architectural choice solves a practical problem and announces an idea. Take the Temple of the Sun. It is built on a transcript of bedrock, and the carved stones echo the bedrock's fractures. The temple's curved wall aligns with the June solstice sun. When sunlight enters, it lights a specific niche. The effect is both mechanical and theatrical. Engineering made ritual precise. The city's planners were acutely aware of risk. They rarely built on terraces that had an unresolvable fall. When slopes looked unstable, they cut channels to divert flows. If a wall's bearing ground was questionable, they anchored foundations into living stone. They balanced load and slip in 1,000 small decisions. That kind of attention is routine in modern engineering, but at Machu Picchu, it was practiced without blueprints. It was learned and transmitted by apprenticeship and memory. There is also evidence that parts of the city were temporary quarters for elites and pilgrims, not a full-time metropolis. Some houses are small and modest. Others are finely finished for ceremonial use. The population estimates vary, perhaps a few hundred to 1,000 people at peak. The city's scale suggests a purposeful concentration, not just a scattered settlement. It was a controlled experiment in urbanism, economy, and ritual, conducted on the edge of a precipice. When the Spanish advanced through the Andes, Machu Picchu did not become a colonial hub. It remained remote, untouched by the conquest's wholesale transformation. Disease and political collapse, however, emptied it. Without constant maintenance, terraces and channels would have required human hands to function. Over a few generations, nature reclaimed edges and filled hollows with soil. That's a quiet form of gravity too, demographic and cultural weight pulling a busy city into silence. Stones stand where people no longer tended them. Fields revert to brush. The same mountain that made construction possible also invited abandonment when political systems changed. Modern archaeology has changed how the site is understood. Early restorations sometimes fixed stones in ways that were later questioned. Today's teams use non-invasive methods, aerial photogrammetry, LiDAR, soil cores, and seismic surveys. They measure stress in walls and model water flow under rainstorms. This is an era where archaeologists and engineers speak in the same language: stress, load, permeability, to understand how a 15th century city responded to forces still at work today. The science has revealed surprising details. Excavations found layers within terrace fill that confirm deliberate drainage strategies, coarse rubble at depth, finer material above, topsoil at the surface. Surveyors discovered subsurface channels carved into bedrock guiding water like invisible gutters. Those findings confirm a hypothesis. The Incas were not improvising with hillside farms. They designed a holistic system in which agriculture, architecture, and hydrology met functioningly. There are human costs in every preservation choice. Limiting visitor numbers affects local livelihoods dependent on tourism. Building protective walkways changes how the site feels to the visitor. Removing vegetation to protect stones changes ecosystems. Every intervention is a negotiation between experience and conservation. That negotiation is ongoing. It is another layer of engineering, social engineering, that seeks to keep Machu Picchu standing. The city's survival through earthquakes also teaches a lesson about resilience. Its strength lies in distributed systems, many small walls sharing load, terraces acting as buffers, channels moving water away. The design did not rely on a single, brittle structure. It created redundancy. That redundancy is a practical philosophy that still resonates with modern design thinking. Build systems that fail gracefully, that give way without catastrophic collapse. Machu Picchu's cultural gravity is different but equally potent. It pulls scholars, pilgrims, and tourists into a conversation about human possibility. The city asserts that people can shape landscapes at great scale without necessarily breaking them. It also reminds us that engineering is inseparable from meaning. Stonework supported crops and kings. Channels fed life and ritual. Geometry expressed power. There are personal stories threaded through these stones. Imagine a young mason fingers raw, smoothing the face of a block until it catches sunlight a certain way. Perhaps he had a son watching from a terrace, or a woman tending maize, listening for the distant call of the queen of flute, trusting the terraces to hold through a storm. These are the lives that animated the site's small acts of care and expertise repeated over seasons until the mountain itself seemed hospitable. Machu Picchu's popularity today is its own challenge. Cameras flash in the dawn haze. Buses wind the switchbacks. One can feel the tension between reverence and commodity. How to make a place available without unmaking it. How to let people learn without letting them erode what they came to see. The answers are imperfect. They include limits, permits, guided paths, and continuing research into materials and root systems. They also include recentering local voices in decisions about stewardship. In the end, the phrase "defied gravity" can mean many things here. It is literal engineers-made platforms where rocks suggested none. It is technical masonry and drainage prevented collapse and erosion. It is social a civilization organized labor, knowledge, and belief to reconfigure a mountain. And it is symbolic a place that brings earth and sky into immediate conversation. When a storm breaks, the city tests itself again. Rain drums on roofs. Runoff finds its channels. A wall might tremble. A fountain keeps flowing. The terraces drink and exhale. That resilience is not invulnerability. It is preparation, practice, and adaptation. The city survives by negotiating forces it cannot command. Time has blurred the intentions of particular builders and distorted the voices of those who lived here. But the physical record remains eloquent. Stone joints speak of hands that measured and adjusted. Channels whisper about careful routing. The layout reveals priorities: supply, ritual, protection, and sight. Those priorities show a culture capable of translating cosmology into construction, of making belief into engineering. Machu Picchu remains a laboratory for listening to stone, to soil, to water, to the choices of ancients and the pressures of modern life. Each season produces new data. Plant roots intrude, microbes colonize surfaces, tourists tread paths. Scientists keep monitoring. Conservationists keep arguing. Local communities keep seeking benefit. Yet when the clouds part and the sun slices the plaza, the effect is simple and immediate. People stand quiet. The geometry of walls and terraces looms like a truth. You realize this city was designed to be inhabited by more than bodies. It was fashioned for attention. It required people who would watch solstices, who would repair a channel, who would carve a niche, and who would train an apprentice. Those small, repeated acts are what ultimately allowed the stone to hold. Machu Picchu did not outwit gravity with magic. It answered gravity with knowledge, practice, and a willingness to work where others saw only peril. It balanced the forces of slope, rain, and time with craft honed over generations. That is the core lesson. Engineering here was a cultural practice as much as a technical one. If you come to Machu Picchu, try to feel that continuum. Notice how terraces diffuse sound. Watch water run in a channel carved centuries ago. Imagine a mason tracing a joint to check its fit. Hear a guide speak in Quechua as well as Spanish. You will find that the place is less an archaeological stage prop and more a living conversation between people and mountain. Some cities are monuments to conquest. Machu Picchu is a monument to negotiation with gravity, with weather, with human limitations. It demonstrates what can be achieved when knowledge is applied with patience and reverence. The mountain still insists on being a mountain. The city still insists on being maintained. Their relationship continues. If you believe stories like this matter, subscribe to Paradigm. Here, every story shifts perspective. Every truth demands attention.